Today we'll be completing the 5th chapter of the 10th canto. Nanda Maharaj meets Vasudeva in Mathura.
After the birth ceremony, Nanda Maharaj decided to go to Mathura to pay the annual tax to the government of Kamsa. Before leaving, he called for the able cowherd men of the village and asked them to take care of Vrindavan in his absence. Krishna book, chapter 5. Shukadeva Goswami continued, Thereafter, my dear King Parikshit, O best protector of Kuru dynasty, Nanda Maharaj appointed the local cowherd men to protect Gokul and then went to Mathura to pay the yearly taxes to King Kamsa. Srimad Bhagavatam 10.5.19.
So Kamsa was the king of the Surasen province on the side of the Jamuna, and in order to maintain his kingdom, he took official taxes from all of the different areas in his kingdom. So Nanda Maharaj, being the king of Braja, he was obligated to go there yearly and pay his taxes.
Because the killing of the babies was going on and had already become known, Nanda Maharaj was very much afraid of his newborn child, Thus he appointed the local cowherd men to protect his home and child. He wanted to go immediately to Mathura to pay the taxes due and also to offer some presentation for the sake of his newborn child. For the protection of the child, he had worshipped various demigods and forefathers and given charity to everyone's satisfaction. Similarly, Nanda Maharaj wanted not only to pay Kamsa the yearly taxes, but also to offer some presentation so that Kamsa too would be satisfied. His only concern was how to protect his transcendental child, Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam 10.5.19 purport.
So generally, of course, all of the cowherd men would stay in Braj, they wouldn't go out. This was a yearly thing, and we have to remember that Vasudeva has been in jail for all these years, so Nanda Maharaj hasn't been able to see his brother Vasudeva. So this will be a very special trip. But the whole time Nanda Maharaj is worrying, and he puts the other cowherd men in charge, and especially to look after his home, because the proclamation is that all the children that have been born within the last 10 days are to be killed by the ministers and the soldiers of Kamsa. So Nanda Maharaj was especially afraid that Kamsa would send someone to kill his child.
This picture is so beautiful. When Nanda Maharaj arrived in Mathura, Vasudeva got the news and was very eager to congratulate his friend. He immediately went to the place where Nanda Maharaj was staying. Krishna book, chapter 5. When Vasudeva heard that Nanda Maharaj, his very dear friend and brother, had come to Mathura and already paid the taxes to Kamsa, he went to Nanda Maharaj's residence. Srimad Bhagavatam 10.5.20.
It's not mentioned where that residence is. We can try to find that out, but for today we don't know where Nanda Maharaj was staying. And apparently he would normally stay a few days, but because Vasudeva was also so worried about Krishna, Vasudeva encouraged him to immediately go back to Braj because of this particular calamity that was going on, Kamsa killing the newborn babies.
Vasudeva and Nanda Maharaj were so intimately connected that they lived like brothers. Furthermore, it is learned from the notes of Shripad Madhvacharya that Vasudeva and Nanda Maharaj were stepbrothers. Vasudeva's father Shurasen married a Vaishya girl, and from her Nanda Maharaj was born. Later Nanda Maharaj himself married a Vaishya girl, Yashoda. Therefore his family is celebrated as a Vaishya family. and Krishna, identifying himself as their son, took charge of Vaishya activities. Krishi Gorakshavanidyam, Bhagavad-Gita 18.44. Balaram represents plowing the land for agriculture and therefore always carries in his hand a plow, whereas Krishna tends cows and therefore carries a flute in his hand. Thus the two brothers represent Krishi Raksha and Go Raksha. Srimad Bhagavatam 10.5.20 purport.
Now this flute playing, of course Krishna, when he grew up a little bit, he was given a flute to attract the cows. And he used to practice on his flute to attract these cows. And he also would, he had a special mala, we'll read about that, a beautiful jeweled mala with 108 beads. And those 108 beads were for the 108 groups of his cows that his father put him in charge of. And after successfully learning to play the flute, not learning, of course Krishna knows everything eternally, but after practicing to attract the cows, then when he got a little older, he used his flute to attract the gopis.
When Vasudeva saw Nanda, he felt that he had regained his life. Nanda, overwhelmed with joy, immediately stood up and embraced Vasudeva. Krishna Book Chapter 5. When Nanda Maharaj heard that Vasudeva had come, he was overwhelmed with love and affection, being as pleased as if his body has regained its life. Seeing Vasudeva suddenly present, he got up and embraced him with both arms. Srimad Bhagavatam 10.5.21. Nanda Maharaj was older than Vasudeva, therefore Nanda Maharaj embraced him and Vasudeva offered him namaskar. This is from the purport.
So here we have one family relationship that we've hearing on for the first time, because previously we had heard that Parjanya Maharaj was the father of Nanda Maharaj. But according to Madhvacharya, Surasen is the father of Nanda Maharaj. In either case, Vasudeva and Nanda Maharaj are just like brothers, step-brothers. So you can see from this picture how Nanda Maharaj is embracing Vasudeva, and they're welcoming all the other cowherd men that came along with Nanda Maharaj. And below are the carts that are parked wherever they're staying. It looks like they're staying with Vasudeva himself.
Vasudeva was received very warmly and offered a nice place to sit. At that time, Vasudeva was anxious about his two sons, who had been put under the protection of Nanda without Nanda's knowledge. With great anxiety, Vasudeva inquired about them. Krishna Book Chapter 5. O Maharaj Parikshit, having thus been received and welcomed by Nanda Maharaj with honor, Vasudeva sat down very peacefully and inquired about his own two sons because of intense love for them. Srimad Bhagavatam 10.5.22.
So there's a beautiful description in the Gopal Champu about when Akrura took Krishna and Balaram, and then also Nanda Maharaj and the other cowherd boys and cowherd men met them. But they didn't enter Mathura, they stayed in the outskirts of Mathura with their bullock carts. So because it says here that Vasudeva was received very warmly, it sounds like Vasudeva went to meet Nanda Maharaj. So it's very possible that Nanda Maharaj and the other cowherd men stayed with their bullock carts, and they just went in to do their work and then came out again, just as they had done later when Krishna was invited for the wrestling match. Here, there's a question, it's a philosophical question, that Vasudeva, he was very concerned about his two sons, that's Balaram and Krishna. But Nanda Maharaj, of course, considered Krishna to be his son. So according to the Acharyas, which we've been discussing for the past few days, Krishna was first born to Yashoda. And then when Vasudeva brought Vasudeva, that form of Vasudeva merged into the form of, merged into the son of Nanda Maharaj, Nanda Nandan. So according to Nanda Maharaj, Krishna is 100% his son. And according to Vasudeva, Krishna is his son. So we'll find out later what happens.
Both Balaram and Krishna were the sons of Vasudeva. Balaram was transferred to the womb of Rohini, Vasudeva's own wife, but Rohini was kept under the protection of Nanda Maharaj. Krishna was personally delivered to Yashoda and exchanged with her daughter. Nanda Maharaj knew that Balaram was the son of Vasudeva, although he did not know that Krishna was also Vasudeva's son. But Vasudeva was aware of this fact and inquired very eagerly about Krishna and Balaram. Krishna Book, Chapter 5.
So though previously in a purport Srila Prabhupada explained that Vishwanath Chakravarti says that Krishna is actually the son of Yashoda, here he's saying that Krishna and Balaram are both the sons of Vasudeva. So we can see it either way, depending upon which verses we're reading. Here Prabhupada says that Krishna is the son of Vasudeva.
Vasudeva then addressed him, "My dear brother, you were old enough and very anxious to beget a son, and yet you had none. Now, by the grace of the Lord, you are fortunate to have a very nice son. I think that this incident is very auspicious for you." Krishna Book, Chapter 5. My dear brother Nanda Maharaj, at an advanced age you had no son at all and were hopeless of having one. Therefore, that you now have a son is a sign of great fortune. Srimad Bhagavatam 10.5.23.
So here also, now Vasudeva is saying that Krishna is Nanda Maharaj's son. So it's a big mystery, and the Acharyas have many different explanations for this mystery. But and Uddhava, when he came years later, for Krishna wanted Uddhava to see the love of the Brijbasis. He said that Krishna is the son, the lover, the master, the friend of all living entities. And Nanda Maharaj, he couldn't understand that at all, because according to Nanda Maharaj, Krishna is only his son.
At an advanced age, one generally cannot beget a male child. If by chance one does beget a child at this age, the child is generally female. Thus Vasudeva indirectly asked Nanda Maharaj whether he had actually begotten a male child or a female child. Vasudeva knew that Yashoda had given birth to a female child, whom he had stolen and replaced with a male child. This was a great mystery, and Vasudeva wanted to determine whether this mystery was already known to Nanda Maharaj. On inquiring, however, he was confident that the mystery of Krishna's birth and his being placed in the care of Yashoda was still hidden. This was no danger, since Kamsa at least could not learn what had already happened. Srimad Bhagavatam 10.5.23 purport.
And Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda's love was so pure for Krishna that even years later, when Krishna was a prince coming from Dwarka with all of his wives in great regale, with chariots and horses and elephants for the solar eclipse, when Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda saw their two sons for the first time after many, many years, for them, they were still 8-year-old little boys. They didn't see them as anything different. They didn't even notice that they had grown up and they had become princes. For them, they set them on their lap. They had them sit on their lap, and they saw them just like they were little boys again.
Dear friend, I was imprisoned by Kamsa. Now I am released. Therefore, this is another birth for me. I had no hope of seeing you again, but by God's grace I can see you. Krishna Book, Chapter 5. It is also by good fortune that I am seeing you. Having obtained this opportunity, I feel as if I have taken birth again. Even though one is present in this world to meet with intimate friends and dear relatives in this material world is extremely difficult. Srimad Bhagavatam 10:5-24.
Now Vasudeva, of course, he's in a state of great lamentation. 6 sons have been killed by Kamsa, and now the 7th son that was sent to Rohini, 8th son he had to deliver to Yashoda secretly, and then the daughter of Nanda Maharaj was killed, not killed, but she went up into the sky, so she also disappeared. So Vasudeva and Devaki, although they had so many sons, actually they're completely alone. Finally, Kamsa has freed them from the prison after all these years, but still they're lamenting that here we are, husband and wife. Vasudeva was a prince, but he couldn't even protect his own children. So he's congratulating Nanda Maharaj for the fact that finally, even in his elderly years, he was able to produce a son. But there's lamentation in his heart because he is completely alone, and therefore he starts speaking to Nanda Maharaj that it's so difficult to meet even with intimate friends and relatives because, and then he'll explain why philosophically.
Vasudeva then expressed his anxiety about Krishna. Krishna was sent incognito to the bed of Mother Yashoda, and after very pompously celebrating his birth ceremony, Nanda Maharaj went to Mathura. So Vasudeva was very pleased and said, "This is a new birth for me." He never expected that Krishna would live because all his other sons were killed by Kamsa. Krishna Book, Chapter 5. Vasudeva had been imprisoned by Kamsa, and therefore, although present in Mathura, he was unable to see Nanda Maharaj for many years. Therefore, when they met again, Vasudeva considered this meeting to be another birth. Srimad Bhagavatam 10:5-24 purport.
So although Devaki and Vasudeva were freed, they weren't free from the anxiety, because so far all of their children, except for Balaram, who was being hidden also in Braj, all the other children had died. And he was so fearful because now Kamsa was looking for Krishna. Durga Devi had told Kamsa, "The child who will kill you has been born elsewhere." So Kamsa was doing everything possible now under the guidance of his Durmati ministers, his rascal ministers, to kill all the children. And Vasudeva, he wanted to make sure that Nanda Maharaj didn't yet understand what Vasudeva had actually done by taking the daughter and replacing the daughter with Krishna.
Vasudeva continued, "My dear friend, it is very difficult for us to live together. Although we have our family and relatives, sons and daughters, by nature's way we are generally separated from one another. The reason for this is that every living entity appears on this earth under different pressures of fruitive activities. Although they assemble together, there is no certainty for their remaining together for a long time. According to one's fruitive activities, one has to act differently and thereby be separated. For example, many plants and creepers are floating on the waves of the ocean. Sometimes they come together and sometimes they separate forever. One plant goes one way and another plant goes another way. Similarly, our family assembly may be very nice while we are living together, but after some time, in the course of the waves of time, we are separated. Krishna Book, Chapter 5.
This is the course of material nature. But Srila Prabhupada, he was giving a lecture here once, and he explained to us that we have families like this in the material world from which we're separated. We're either separated by distance, by time, or ultimately by death. So, because no relationship is permanent in this material world. But when we become Krishna conscious and we return to the spiritual world, there we have our eternal family. So, if we study the scriptures closely, we find out that there are also families in the spiritual world. And those families have children, husbands, wives, just like what we're experiencing here in a temporary nature. But in the spiritual world, we all have our eternal families. And gradually, as we become more Krishna conscious, all of this will be revealed to us, who we are, what our service is, what our relationship is, and all of the eternal associates of the Supreme Lord. When we go back to the spiritual world, they'll welcome us back to our situation. Just like we saw in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Leela, there were so many families. And these families, they're the exact counterparts to who they are in Braj Leela as well. So all of these relationships in relation to Krishna are eternal. But here in the material world, due to the force of the three modes of material nature, we're not able to remain in permanent relationships. And therefore we're always again and again trying to find these permanent relationships that are only available in the spiritual world.
Many planks and sticks unable to stay together are carried away by the force of river's waves. Similarly, although we are intimately related with friends and family members, we are unable to stay together because of our varied past deeds and the waves of time. Srimad Bhagavatam 10.5.25. Purport. Vasudeva was lamenting because he and Nanda Maharaj could not live together. Yet how could they live together? Vasudeva wants that all of us, even if intimately related, are carried away by the waves of time according to the results of past karma.
Now, of course, these are all pure devotees who are speaking. It's not a question of karma. It's a question of Krishna Leela and how Krishna is intensifying the love of each of his devotees. Because as we see here, Mathura is not far away. We can walk to Mathura easily. It's about 8 kilometers away. But the Mathura-vasis couldn't come to Vraj. And even when the Brajavasis went to Mathura, Vasudeva warned Nanda Maharaj, go back quickly, go back today, because there might be disturbances. So although so close physically the two places are, now the devotees in Mathura are suffering intense viraha for Krishna. And Krishna has gone to Vrindavan to enjoy with the Brijbasi devotees, his pure devotees there. But in just 11 years, Krishna will go to Mathura, and then everything will exactly change. All of the Brijbasis will suffer intense separation. And even Krishna, while he's in Mathura, he'll be suffering just as much separation from his devotees as his devotees will be suffering for him. So this is an increasement of the love between all of the devotees to purify their love.
The purport of this expression by Vasudeva is this. Although he had 8 sons born in the womb of Devaki, unfortunately they were all gone. He could not even keep his one son Krishna with him. Vasudeva was feeling his separation, but he could not express the real fact. Please tell me about the welfare of Vrindavan, he said. You have many animals. Are they happy? Are they getting sufficient grass and water? Please also let me know whether the place where you are now living is undisturbed and peaceful? Krishna book chapter 5.
So, as we discussed before, Nanda Maharaj, being in charge of so many cows, hundreds and thousands of cows, and also overseeing the Vaishya activities of the members of his community. It wasn't only Vaishyas, there were also Brahmins and there were others as well. But because of the cows, they had to move from time to time. They were nomadic. It wasn't that they only stayed in Mahavan. It was while the grasses were nice there, while the atmosphere was nice, the situation was safe, they were in Mahavan. But once the demons started coming from Mathura side, they all together decided that they had to move from there. So previously, Parjanya Maharaj, his ancestral land was in Nandagaon. So that means from Nandagaon, they had already wandered all the way to Mahavan. And now they decided they were going to go back. But it wasn't immediate. Like nowadays, we can go to Nandagaon in an hour and a half. But it took them a few years because they had to build the residential places. And during those few years is when Krishna lived here in Vrindavan, right at Chatikara. So we'll read about all these beautiful pastimes. For now, Nanda Maharaj and his whole community are in Mahavan. And because Nanda Maharaj is a Vaishya, that means he's looking after the welfare of the cows. And Vasudeva, he's a Kshatriya, he's looking after the welfare of the human beings, the mankind. So the first thing he asks is, how are the cows? Are they getting enough grass, enough water? Because as a Vaishya, that was Nanda Maharaj's principal responsibility.
My dear friend Nanda Maharaj, in the place where you are living with your friends, is the forest favorable for the animals and the cows? I hope there is no disease or inconvenience. The place must be full of water, grass and other plants. Srimad Bhagavatam 10.5.26. For human happiness, one must care for the animals, especially the cows. Vasudeva therefore inquired whether there was a good arrangement for the animals where Nanda Maharaj lived. For the proper pursuit of human happiness, there must be arrangements for the protection of cows. This means that there must be forests and adequate pasturing grounds full of grass and water. If the animals are happy, there will be an ample supply of milk, from which human beings will benefit by deriving many milk products with which to live happily. Srimad Bhagavatam 10.5.26 purport.
So now it's summertime here in Vrindavan, and if you've lived here enough summers, you'll notice that this time of year when it's very, very hot, hundreds and thousands of cows are wandering to come to the Jamuna River. And also the fasal, the harvest is finished now. It's the hot season, so nothing can grow until the rains start. So the cowherd men, they come like this, they wear their red turbans, and they have their families, and they wander through the fields so that the cows can eat whatever's left over from the harvesting. And gradually they reach the Jamuna River so the cows can have water. And they stay there and they wander until the rains start, and then they go back to their homes, usually in Rajasthan or other places nearby here. In fact, if you go to Jaipur, which is called Second Vrindavan, the Jaipur Vasis, they insist that Krishna used to wander also to Jaipur. And a portion of Braj is also in Rajasthan. One section is in Haryana, one section in UP, one section in Rajasthan. Yes, Kamyavan is in Rajasthan, Dig is in Rajasthan, Bharatpur is in Rajasthan, half of Govardhan is in Rajasthan. So all these places, these different borders, they weren't the same then. It was wherever the cows got their grass and got their water, that's where they lived. So that's Vaishya life. And just like we have the example of when Dasarath Maharaj, when Vishwamitra Muni came to ask Dasarath for his 2 sons to kill the demons, Taraka, Maricha, Subahu, right? So the first question is very famous that Dasarath Maharaj asked is, how is your endeavor to conquer over this cycle of birth and death? Because Vishwamitra Muni, he was a sage. And a sage is always aspiring for liberation from the material world. So depending upon the order of life one is in, one inquires. So therefore Vasudeva is inquiring, how is your occupation? How are the cows? Do they have enough water? Do they have enough grass? Because this is what Vasudeva was meditating upon. This is his responsibility. And we already heard that the cows were taken care of so nicely that there was enough milk products that they could even have a festival with it, throw it on each other. So it means everything was going nicely with the cows at this time.
As enjoined in Bhagavad-Gita 18.44, Krishi Goraksha Manijam Vaishya Karma Swabhavajam. Without giving proper facilities to the animals, how can human society be happy? That people are raising cattle to send to the slaughterhouse is great sin. By this demoniac enterprise, people are ruining their chance for a truly human life. Because they are not giving any importance to the instructions of Krishna, the advancement of their so-called civilization resembles the crazy efforts of men in a lunatic asylum. Srimad Bhagavatam 10.5.26 purport.
When Srila Prabhupada first wrote the Krishna book, he had an editor. And in America, they have huge cattle farms. Cattle means cows that are raised especially for slaughter. And they're bred in a particular way so that they have a large quantity of meat and they produce less milk. Through genetics, they breed them like that. No milk at all, for their babies. Yeah. So here it's just the opposite. Here the cows are famous for the amount of milk that they can deliver. So the editor of Prabhupada's first books, because they didn't understand the Vedic culture, when Prabhupada talked about herds of cows, he changed the word to cattle because he didn't know any better. He didn't understand. So this is the difference, complete opposite. In the lunatic Western culture, the cows are raised for slaughter. And it's the saddest thing you can see in America. I'm sure you must have seen it because you were in Tucson. They shove them all into trucks and take them to the slaughterhouse. In the middle of the night, it's freezing cold, and they're crying, and it breaks your heart. You just want to go and tear open the trucks and let the cows out. But because the social structure is so much insidiously set up like that, what can you do? You can't do anything. All you can do is set up an ideal society so that other people can see how perfect the Vedic culture is. So this is what Prabhupada wanted us to do. He wanted us to, for instance, we have one group here called Back to Cows. And they just sent a circular out. How Prabhupada said there's no need for cities. If everyone is just happy taking care of the cows, working on the land, then everything that you need is automatically delivered from the cows, from the land, naturally. So we don't need all the ugra karma in the cities anymore. So this is how people lived in Braj. And Mathura being a city, they had marketplaces, it was a Vedic city, but they didn't have the cows there. There was no room for cows. So all the Vaishya community, they lived on the outskirts of Mathura city. And that's why Nanda Maharaj had to go every year to pay the taxes to Mathura, the city.
This inquiry was made by Vasudeva because he was very anxious about Krishna's safety. He knew that Kamsa and his followers were trying to kill Krishna by sending various kinds of demons. They had already resolved that all children born within 10 days of the birthday of Krishna should be killed. Because Vasudeva was so anxious about Krishna, he inquired about the safety of his residence. Krishna Book, Chapter 5.
So there was intention to his questions. Not just was he inquiring about how Nanda Maharaj was, how the community was, but he was especially concerned because now Krishna was there with Nanda Maharaj. So he had 2 sons there under Nanda Maharaj's care. And he was all alone, no children at all, 2 sons with Nanda Maharaj. So he was very concerned that the children were safe and the community was prospering.
He also inquired about Balaram and his mother Rohini, who were entrusted to the care of Nanda Maharaj. Vasudeva also reminded Nanda Maharaj that Balaram did not know his real father. He knows you as his father. And now you have another child, Krishna, and I think you are taking very nice care of both of them. Krishna Book, Chapter 5. My son Baladev, being raised by you and your wife Yashoda Devi, considers you his father and mother. Is he living very peacefully in your home with his real mother Rohini? Srimad Bhagavatam 10.5.27.
So we know that Krishna has unlimited names. Balaram also has so many names. One of his names is Rohini Nandan, and another name of his is Vasudev, just like Krishna, because he's also the son of Vasudeva. But because Balaram took his birth in Vrindavan, in the home of Nanda Maharaj, he considered Nanda Maharaj to be his father. He didn't know he had never met Vasudeva, he had never met Devaki, he only knew Rohini, Nandarani, that's Yashoda, and Nanda Maharaj. So that was his family. And now he had a little brother, Krishna.
It is also significant that Vasudeva inquired about welfare of Nanda Maharaj's animals. The animals, and especially the cows, were protected exactly in the manner of one's children. Vasudeva was a Kshatriya and Nanda Maharaj was a Vaishya. It is a duty of Kshatriya to give protection to the citizens of mankind, and it is a duty of Vaishyas to give protection to the cows. The cows are as important as the citizens. Just as human citizens should be given all kinds of protection, so the cows also should be given full protection. Krishna Book, Chapter 5.
Now when Sri Krishna wound up his pastimes and took everybody back to Godhead with him, and Braj was empty, Sandilya Rishi, who was the Muni here in Braj, he assigned Parikshit Maharaj to Delhi, Hastinapur, and he assigned Vajranabha Maharaj to look after Braj. And everything was quickly disappearing because there were no people left. Everyone had gone back to Godhead with Krishna. So these 2 separations were there. One was the city, that's Parikshit Maharaj, and one was the country, that was Vajranabha Maharaj. And Vajranabha Maharaj, he had a different assignment than Parikshit Maharaj. Of course, Parikshit Maharaj being the emperor, he had to maintain all of the Varnashram Dharma for all of the citizens. And Vajranabha Maharaj, he had to make sure that all the places of pastimes weren't lost. by establishing deities, by building wells, by building temples. So they had two different responsibilities. So in Braj, the main responsibility was to take care of the cows. And so many of the places of pastime are in relation to Krishna when he would herd the cows and play with the cowherd boys and play with the cowherd girls. Because this is what Krishna did when he was in Braj. He would just play with his friends, and he enjoyed playing so much that Nanda Maharaj wouldn't give him heavy responsibility. He would just let him herd the cows and be with his cowherd boyfriends and cowherd girlfriends.
Vasudha continued to say that the maintenance of religious principles, economic development and satisfactory execution of meeting of demands of the senses depend on cooperation among relatives, nations and all humanity. Therefore, it is everyone's duty to see that his fellow citizens and cows are not put into difficulty. One should see to the peace and comfort of his fellow men and the animals. The development of religious principles, economic development and sense gratification can then be achieved without difficulty. Krishna Book, Chapter 5.
So according to the Varna that one is in, he has particular responsibilities. I think it's the next one, is it? Yes. In the next two, we'll see that even amongst the Vaishyas, there are different categories of Vaishyas who have different responsibilities. And Nanda Maharaj was in charge of all of these Vaishyas as the king of Braj, Brajaraj.
In Braja, the protectors of domestic animals are descendants of Yadu dynasty. And they may be divided into three groups. The Vaishyas, for the most part of the most important Vaishyas earn their livelihood by protecting cows. Some of the Vaishyas are born from lower caste mothers and they are known as Abhiras. The Abhiras. The Abhiras are those who have Vaishya fathers and Shudra mothers. A little inferior to the Vaishyas who are engaged in cow protection, the Abhiras earn their livelihood by protecting buffalo. They are known by various names such as Ghosha. And the Garjaras. A little inferior to the Abhiras, the Garjaras earn their livelihood by protecting goats and similar animals.
What was the purpose of the buffaloes?
Buffaloes, they're the sisters of the cows. They give very rich milk that we can make yogurt out of and other things.
Actually, Prabhupada said that was okay.
Well, you'll hear.
A little inferior to the Abhiras, the Garjaras earn their livelihood by protecting goats and similar animals. Their bodily features are a little chubby and they reside on the outskirts of Raja.
So as you live in Vrindavan or Braj, you find out that all of these classifications are still existing. There's a whole community called the Gurjars. You've heard of the Gurjars? Sometimes they make political, they want different requirements. So, yes.
Raga called Gurjari police. They sing in the morning.
Yeah?
It's Raga.
So, even amongst the Vaishyas, and of course, this is just the type of Vaishyas that are looking after the animals. So, the Vaishyas, such as Nanda Maharaj, they look after the cows, and they're married to Vaishya women. Yashoda's village is very near to Nanda Maharaj, called Marana. Very beautiful village. So she was also from Vaishya family, and she married Nanda Maharaj, who was a Vaishya. And then the Abhiras, they look after the buffaloes. The buffaloes are considered to be the sisters of the cows. And the buffaloes give very rich milk. They don't have sweat pores. So therefore they have to stay in the water to keep cool. Buffaloes, yes. The, yeah. And it's said that one of Nanda Maharaja's brother, Upananda, we heard about the village of Kaira. So Kaira is also walking distance from Nandagan, and that was his village. And he used to have buffaloes there. And he would especially make this buffalo yogurt, buffalo dahi, that Krishna would enjoy, because it was very rich. And then the gurjas we just heard about. So these, all of these different classes of Vaishyas are still existing here in Braj.
In what sense they're existing?
Excuse me?
In what sense are they existing?
They're looking after some are looking after goats, some are looking after buffaloes, some are looking after cows.
That's not in this area though.
Yeah. You can see whole herds of goats going by sometimes and sheep.
How far do they go out?
Just right where, just 10 minutes from here.
I mean, how far is this whole tract of it?
Oh, all of Braj.
Does it go all the way to Lucknow? Like,
Huh?
does it go all the way up to Lucknow?
All the way up to Lucknow. No, well these classifications of Vaishyas are everywhere. They're not just in Braj, but they're also in Braj. So in Braj you'll find the goat herders, the sheep herders, the people who take care of buffaloes, the people who take care of cows. That's one aspect of the Vaishya responsibility. And they're all still here.
So they're all connected, but they have different tribes or something.
They have different responsibilities, different types of animals.
All these different cities, these cities in India, like Lucknow, and then you have, on the other side you have...
Yeah, well, in between, I mean, there aren't that many, cities are new things. Usually, previously, practically all of India was agrarian, and there were only a few big cities. Now there are more cities because there's so much ugra karma with factories and things like that. But the common people who were the Vaishyas, they have their different family traditions, taking care of particular types of animals. So all of these types of Vaishyas were part of the community of Braj, even in the time of Nanda Maharaj.
So the people nowadays think these people are backwards, right?
Someone might consider them backwards, but they're not backwards. It's just Varnashram Dharma.
Modern Indians probably think they're backwards.
That's just the westernized people. Everybody else knows it. It's part of the culture, the Vedic culture. They have their own very beautiful culture, Krishna conscious culture.
So I mean, they won't do anything to help these people because they think they're just backward people. They're like
No, Vaishyas real Vaishyas are wealthy.
You've got the Indians in the cities and stuff, doing all the factories. And then
Yeah, the ugra karma in the
they see
cities.
these people that
Right.
herding their cows and goats and stuff. And they think that's primitive.
Well, that's why Prabhupada wants us to do that, to show that that's the actual real Vedic civilization.
Among all the cows of Nanda Maharaj, several of Mother Yashoda's cows ate only grasses so flavorful that the grasses would automatically flavor the milk. These 8 specific cows were called Padmagandha, and their milk was as fragrant as the lotus flower. Just as swans live only on lotus stalks, so these cows ate only special grass. Mother Yashoda took particular care of these cows and used their milk to make special sweets for Krishna. She hoped that he would lose interest in the butter and yogurt from the houses of other gopis. In this way, she made an attempt to rectify his stealing habits.
So these are some of the wonderful activities of Vaishya community. How Mother Yasoda, she would even have special cows just for Krishna called Padmaganda, because the cows would produce especially fragrant milk that she would make sweets for Krishna with. So this Vaishya community, naturally, I mean, why did Krishna leave Mathura and come to Braj? Because this is his eternal activity. He's Gopal, he's Govinda. This is what the Supreme Lord does. He lives with the cowherd people and he herds the cows, and that's his eternal pleasure.
Vasudeva expressed his sorrow due to not being able to give protection to his own son born of Devaki. He was thinking that religious principles, economic development and the satisfaction of his senses were therefore all lost. Krishna Book, Chapter 5. When one's friends and relatives are properly situated, one's religion, economic development and sense gratification, as described in the Vedic literatures, are beneficial. Otherwise, if one's friends and relatives are in distress, these three cannot offer any happiness. Srimad Bhagavatam 10.5.28. Purport. Vasudeva regretfully informed Nanda Maharaj that although he had his wife and children, he could not properly discharge his duty of maintaining them and was therefore unhappy.
So the three things being spoken here are dharma, artha, or kama. One engages in a form of dharma in order to get economic gain. And with economic gain, one can enjoy the senses. But if one doesn't have family, relatives, or if there's distress amongst any of one's relatives or friends, one can't even enjoy these three things because they're not meant to be enjoyed alone. You want to enjoy them with your loved ones. So Vasudeva, he was lamenting to Nanda Maharaj that although I have everything, my life is full of sorrow because I've lost all my children. I couldn't even protect my own children, and my wife and I are all alone. So despite being a prince, despite being so religious, wealthy, all types of facility for sense gratification, he couldn't be happy because he was separated from his relatives.
On hearing this, Nanda Maharaj replied, "My dear Vasudeva, I know that you are very much aggrieved because the cruel king Kamsa has killed all your sons born of Devaki. Although the last child was a daughter, Kamsa could not kill her and she has entered into the celestial planets. My dear friend, do not be aggrieved. We are all being controlled by our past unseen activities. Everyone is subjected to his past deeds, and one who is conversant with the philosophy of karma and its reactions is a man in knowledge. Such a person will not be aggrieved at any incident, happy or miserable." Krishna Book, Chapter 5.
Now Nanda Maharaj, being the elder brother to Vasudeva, he's trying to pacify him with reason, with spiritual knowledge, and we could say he's preaching to him that according to our past activities and the reactions of our past deeds, a person should not be aggrieved because this happiness and misery, they come according to our past deeds. So he was speaking Divya Gyan to Vasudeva, trying to pacify his mind. And I think you can all remember that just last chapter, Vasudeva was also being preached to. By whom? By Kamsa. And Kamsa was preaching the exact same philosophy to Vasudeva. We'll see how exactly same the slokas are.
Nanda Maharaj said, "Alas, King Kamsa killed so many of your children born of Devaki, and your one daughter, the youngest child of all, entered the heavenly planets. 10.5.29 Srimad Bhagavatam. Purport. When Vasudeva understood from Nanda Maharaj that the mystery of Krishna's birth and his having been exchanged with Yashoda's daughter was yet undisclosed, he was happy that the things were going on nicely. But saying that Vasudeva's daughter, his youngest child, had gone to the heavenly planets, Nanda Maharaj indicated that he did not know that this daughter was born of Yashoda and that Vasudeva had exchanged her with Krishna. Thus the doubts of Vasudeva were dispelled. Every man is certainly controlled by destiny, which determines the results of one's fruitive activities. In other words, one has a son or daughter because of unseen destiny, and when the son or daughter is no longer present, this is also due to unseen destiny. Destiny is the ultimate controller of everyone. One who knows this is never bewildered. Srimad Bhagavatam 10.5.30. Purport. Nanda Maharaj consoled his younger brother Vasudeva by saying that destiny is ultimately responsible for everything. Vasudeva should not be unhappy that his many children had been killed by Kamsa, or that the last child, the daughter, had gone to the heavenly planets.
So this is basically exactly what Kamsa also told Vasudeva, that according to the destiny of the 6 children that he had murdered, they were now separated. And therefore Vasudeva and Devaki shouldn't lament, because Kamsa wasn't actually the killer, it was destiny that caused them to be killed. So this was the murderer preaching to the mother and father of the children. Now we have the brother trying to console his younger brother with the exact same philosophy. Vasudeva, when Kamsa spoke to him, Vasudeva was just he was just happy to know that Krishna was safe in Braj. And now that he understands that Nanda Maharaj doesn't understand that Vasudeva had switched the babies, he's also happy because he feels that Krishna is safe. And Nanda Maharaj is exactly saying the same thing that Kamsa said. Now, I think next we'll hear what Kamsa said. Yes.
In a few years, he's going to speak to Nanda same thing.
Yeah, later on, exactly.
King Kamsa said, "O great souls, your children have suffered their own misfortune. Therefore, please do not lament for them. All living entities are under the control of Supreme, and they cannot always live together." Srimad Bhagavatam 10.4.18. My dear sister Devaki, all good fortune unto you. Everyone suffers and enjoys the results of his own work under the control of Providence. Therefore, although your sons have unfortunately been killed by me, please do not lament for them. Srimad Bhagavatam 10.4.21.
And then, later, as Govinda Dasi pointed out, Vasudeva will be preaching to Nanda Maharaj when Vasudeva takes Krishna and Balaram away from him. Later at the battle at Kurukshetra, at the solar eclipse, he says that, we'll find out what he says, I'll get the verses. So we all have to somehow or other understand this philosophy that our relationships are all temporary in this material world and are coming together and are being separated from our loved ones is by the force of the destiny of each person according to their past activities. And therefore, when we feel separation, we shouldn't lament.
Isn't there some kind of a family line? Like I see in Mahabharata, like the family line, they continue all the way through Mahabharata. Like they're having heavenly planet meetings and Ganga Devi's meeting with these Devi.
Yeah, but it's all within the material world. So it's all temporary.
What's more like celestial?
Even celestial is in the material world. It's only when you go back to your eternal family in Goloka Vrindavan do you have your real family relationships. Otherwise, all relationships, even in the heavenly planets, are temporary and must be separated.
I was
Yes.
thinking when Prabhupada was saying that you're responsible for your family line, and that, like they offer prasadam to their family.
Yeah, but that's only, even when you offer pinda, when you offer to the Pitris, that's only for 3 generations that they get to stay in Pitri Loka. It's all temporary. All of those things. That's why devotees no longer have responsibilities towards their family for these things, because they're aiming for their eternal family, and automatically, by their becoming a devotee, all of the members of 7 generations backwards, 7 generations forward, on their mother's side, on their father's side, they all get liberated. So the highest benefit you can give to your temporary family is to become a devotee, because then they get liberated and they also have the opportunity to become devotees.
Vasudha then replied, "My dear Nanda, if you have already paid the government taxes, then return soon to your place, because I think that there may be some disturbances in Gokula." Krishna book chapter 5. Vasudha said to Nanda Maharaj, "Now my dear brother, since you have paid the annual taxes to Kamsa and have also seen me, do not stay in this place for many days. It is better to return to Gokula, since I know that there may be some disturbances there." Srimad Bhagavatam 10.5.31. After the friendly conversation between Nanda Maharaj and Vasudeva, Vasudeva returned to his home. The cowherd men headed by Nanda Maharaj, who had come to Mathura to pay their taxes, also returned. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of 5th chapter of Krishna, meeting of Nanda and Vasudeva. Shukadeva Goswami said, after Vasudeva advised Nanda Maharaj in this way, Nanda Maharaj and his associates, the cowherd men, took permission from Vasudeva, yoked their bulls to the bullock carts, and started riding for Gokula. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport to the 10th canto, 5th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Meeting of Nanda Maharaj and Vasudeva.
So tomorrow we'll hear about the killing of the first demon that Kamsa sent to kill Krishna, Putana. Hare Krishna.